My name is Marwa Alkomi, and I will be presenting on Erikson's stages of psychosocial theory. These stages were advocated by Erikson, which explained 8 stages through which a healthy human should pass from infancy to late adulthood. Each stage builds upon the successful completion of earlier stages, and the stages focus on conflicts throughout our lifespans and how we deal with and make decisions regarding those conflicts. So they characterize an individual advancing through the 8 life stages as a function of negotiating his or her biological forces and sociocultural forces. So each of the stages are characterized by some psychosocial crisis of these 2 conflicting forces, and I will go ahead and explain those in a later slide. So this is a picture depicting the different stages for those visual learners, and here's another one. But to get us started, the first stage being infancy, which is from birth to 18 months, the basic conflict that I was referring to earlier here is trust versus mistrust, and an important event that takes place is feeding. The second stage is early childhood, which is from the ages of 2 to 3, the basic conflict here being autonomy versus shame and doubt, and an important event that takes place in this stage is toilet training. Preschool, from the age of 3 to 5 years old, is the third stage, and the basic conflict here is initiative versus guilt, with exploration taking place a lot in this stage. School age is the fourth stage, from the age of 6 to 11 years old, with the basic conflict here being industry versus inferiority, and important events here is school. And then the fifth stage, adolescence, being from the ages of 12 to 18, the basic conflict that takes place a lot in this stage is identity versus role confusion, seeing as a lot of social relationships take place. The sixth stage is young adulthood, from the age of 19 to 40. Some basic conflicts that take place here are intimacy versus isolation, where a lot of relationships take over. The seventh stage is middle adulthood, from the age of 40 to 65, with the basic conflict being generativity versus stagnation. Work and parenthood are some important events that take place here, and the last stage, the eighth stage, being maturity from the age of 65 onwards. Ego, integrity versus despair is the basic conflict that takes place there, and important events would be reflection of life. So the first stage here being trust versus mistrust, from birth to 18 months. The child comes to trust and mistrust themselves and other people, but that depends on the social care and comfort that the primary giver, whether it's the mother or not, has provided. If the infant's needs are met and genuine affection is shown, they think the world is safe and dependable. But if the care is inadequate, inconsistent, or negative, and there is no genuine affection being shown at that point, they would approach the world with fear and suspicion. So a lot of the things that happen in this stage include they begin to talk, they learn to eat solid foods, they begin to walk, and they begin developing trust. It's the fastest growth period in life. The second stage being autonomy versus shame and doubt. This happens between the ages of 1 to 3 years old. And during this stage, society creates on children a new conflict, that is whether to assert their will or not. So when parents are patient, accepting, and encouraging, children acquire a sense of independence and competence. But when children are not allowed such freedom and are overprotected, they may doubt their ability to deal with the environment. So in this stage, the important event that takes place is toilet training, and the important relationship is with parents. The child's energy is directed towards mastering physical skills like walking, grasping, muscular control. And the child learns self-control, but may develop shame, doubt, impulsivity, or compulsion if not handled well. So the third stage here, being initiative versus guilt, happens between the ages of 3 to 6 years old. And at this stage, children gain freedom in exploring their environment and often attempt tasks that parents don't really approve of. Parents who allow their children freedom to explore and master new tasks are allowing them to develop initiative. But on the other hand, parents who curtail this freedom and make their children feel as though their activities are pointless, the children can become passive and feel guilty about doing things on their own. And some of the things that happen in this stage are exploration. So children need to begin exerting control and power over their environments And success in this stage leads to a sense of purpose, which is really important. Children who try to exert too much power experience disapproval, resulting in a sense of guilt. So the fourth stage here is inferiority versus industry, which happens between the ages of 6 to 12 years old. This period reflects the determination of children to master what they are doing so that they develop a successful sense of modest industry. Parents and teachers who support, reward, and praise children are encouraging and help develop a child's sense of industry, but those who ignore a child's efforts are strengthening their feelings of inferiority. And this happens a lot at the school age. This is where this stage primarily takes place. Children need to cope with new social and academic demands, and success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results in feelings of inferiority. So stage 5, which happens primarily between the ages of 12 to 20 years old, is identity versus role confusion. They're young adults at this point, or adolescents, and they seek independence from their parents, achieve physical maturity, and are concerned about what kind of person they're going to become. They try on many new roles, and if they experience continuity in their perception of self, identity then develops. When adolescents fail to develop a sense of identity, he or she experiences role confusion or a negative identity. So a lot of the important events that take place in this stage is social relationships, where teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. This success leads to an ability to stay true to yourself, while failure leads to role confusion and a weak sense of self. For stage 6, intimacy versus isolation, which takes place between the ages of 20 to 40 years old. Young adults here reach out and make contact with other people and to fuse one's identity with that of another to develop intimate relationships. Central intimacy is the ability to share with and care for others, and failure to establish that relationship or that intimate relationship results in a feeling of isolation. So as I had previously alluded to in the other slide, relationships are some of the main events that take place at this stage, and success leads to strong relationships while failure leads to loneliness and isolation. So stage 7, generativity versus stagnation, which tends to occur between the ages of 40 and 65 years old. Generativity is when, it has a lot to do with parental responsibility, interest in producing and guiding the next generation. It entails selflessness, whereas stagnation is a condition in which individuals are not able to find meaning and purpose in their life and has very little interest in self-improvement or in making contributions to society. Some of the main events that take place here are work and parenthood. Adults need to create or nature things that will outlast them, often by having children or creating a positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to feelings of usefulness and accomplishment, while failure results in shallow involvement in the world. So stage 8 is ego integrity versus despair, which happens between the age of 65 years old onwards. Some in this stage feel a sense of satisfaction with their life's accomplishment and achieve a sense of integrity, while others experience despair and feeling that their time is too short for an attempt to start another life and to try alternative roads to integrity. A lot of important events that take place here include maturity. Older adults need to look back on life and feel a sense of fulfillment. Success at this stage leads to feelings of wisdom, while failure results in regret, bitterness, and despair. So to start off on our discussion questions, the first one being, what are the stages of Erikson's psychosocial development? And these are the 8 stages: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. So for the second question, what exactly did Erik Erikson believe? So Erikson believed that human personalities continued to develop past the age of 5, and he believed that the development of personality depended directly on the resolution of existential crises like trust, autonomy, intimacy, individuality, integrity, and lastly, identity. What aspects of Erikson's theory are most important for educators to understand? The key idea in his theory is that the individual faces a conflict at each stage, which may or may not be successfully resolved within that stage. For example, he called the first stage trust versus mistrust. If the quality of care is good in infancy, the child learns to trust the world to meet his or her needs. How do you apply Erikson's theory to the classroom? Some things that you could do is provide a portion of the day when children can choose their own activities, have a classroom library where children can pick their own books during reading time. This allows children the opportunity to learn how to make decisions for themselves, and break instruction and activities down into small steps. Are Erikson's stages of development still relevant? And to answer that question, yes, they're still relevant today, as it was when it was first developed over 7 decades ago. In fact, the theory is even more relevant today given the increasing pressures on family life and relationships, as well as the quest for personal development and fulfillment in life. So here's an activity on the 8 stages of Erikson's development. Students are going to choose a few of their favorite characters from TV shows and movies and discuss whether their behavior seems to fit into Erikson's stages of development based on the character's approximate age. And why or why not do they or do they not fit within that particular stage of development.